Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tat Padam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai. Yata Sarvani Bhutani Pratibhanti Stithani Cha Yatra Evo Bhashamam Yanti Tasmai Satyatmane Namaha. Did someone come in? May I ask you to poke that on your way by? How are you all? We'll wait for you to get your stuff. So we are finishing up the chapter on the power of thought, the power of the mind. And we are now starting on the last story in this chapter, the story of the child. Puneet, would you chant? I could hear better, frankly, when you're chanting here in the room. What page are we on? What verse?
59, section 4. That's the beginning of the story of the child, section 4.
All right.
So 50. It would be the 60, it would be the verse that's read, but the Sanskrit's on 59. What
page are we on again, please?
59. The bottom of page 59.
Bottom of page 59. Do you have it?
Yeah.
All right. Will you help us out, please?
Sure. Balakakhyayika, the story of the child. Sarva Shakti Param Brahma Nityam Apurnam Avyayam Yayo Lalasati Shaktya Asau Prakasham Sodhikachati. The Supreme Brahman, the ultimate reality, which is eternal, full all around, and immutable, is all powerful. By its power, one shines forth and attains manifestation.
Yes. So here it starts off with this fundamental principle. Brahman, universal consciousness, is everywhere present and is kutusta, is still like a mountain, does not move. Yet, inherent within it is the possibility of all. And as Krishna says in Gita, it's one small corner, one teeny tiny part of the Lord's infinite being is the whole cosmos, which comes about by means of Maya Shakti, the power of how do we say what Maya is? Maya is the word, this is my favorite definition, to describe how the impossible seems possible. How is it that consciousness, which is one without a second, always the eternal subject, and achalam, completely immovable, seems by means of sankalpa to manifest this multiplicitous universe. Going on, next verse.
Chichatti tasya deheshu jadashakti tathopale spanda shaktischa vateshu dravashakti jaleshu cha. It is the energy of consciousness in his bodies, physical, mental, etc., as well as the motionless or potential energy in a stone. It is also the energy of vibration in the winds and the energy of motion in the waters.
So this eternal power is what appears as the prana in the body, what empowers the minds and the thoughts, as well as what makes a stone, and the stars to shine. Everything comes about. Again, this becomes easy to understand if you go to the dream state. Remember, you are the god of your dream. So in my dream, there I am driving a car, and I look outside and I see a cow, and I see a tree, and I see a big rock. It is my mind that manifests as the person in the car. I identify with it as an ego. It is the car, it's the cow, it's the tree, it's the stone. All of it is my one mind manifesting as that. This is no different, macrocosmically. Going on.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Do you find verse 41 goes very well with like the electromagnetic effect and everything being energy and vibration and stuff like that?
I don't know.
Okay, my apologies.
Going on.
Shunya shakti tatha kashe nasha shakti vinashishu teja shakti tatha vahnyao sputam evo palabhyate. It is also the energy of the void in space and the energy of destruction in the perishable. So it is clearly understood as the energy of heat and light and fire.
Yes. So what is it that makes space space? So for example, with your eyes closed, if you imagine that you're looking up at the sky, the vast, spacious sky, it is the capacity of consciousness to create space. That's the shunya shakti, the voidness, the capacity to create a space. So there was shunya shakti. What was the next one?
Nasha shakti, the energy of destruction.
Yes. So what is it? We would call it in science the principle of entropy. Isn't that entropy when everything's falling apart? So it's not only the energy that brings things together, but then makes them fall apart. The next one?
Teja shakti.
Brilliance. The illuminating quality, the fact that you can see stuff, that you can cognize stuff. What is he translated as?
Energy of heat and light in fire.
Okay. Is that all of them?
Yeah.
Next verse.
Phalapatra lata pushpa shakha vita विटमपूलवान् वृक्षबीजे यथा वृक्ष तथेदं ब्रह्मणि स्थितम्. Just as a tree possessing fruits, leaves, creepers, flowers, branches, sprouts, and roots exist in the seed of the tree, this visible universe exists in Brahman, the Supreme Spirit.
Yes. So in the seed is the potentiality of the tree. From the tiny acorn, the mighty oak grows. From the incredibly tiny mustard seed, a vast hillside of mustard plants can grow. So also inherent within consciousness, in a seed form, is the potentiality. Everything that ever can be manifested, past, present, or future. Going on.
क्वचित् क्वचित् कदाचित् च तस्मात् बुध्यन्ति शक्तयः देशकालादिवैश्चिन्त्यात् क्षमालादिवशालयः. In one place and in another, and at some time or other, energies rise from it like rice, rising from the surface of the earth by the diversity of place, time, and the like.
So you plant rice in the paddy, and then water comes, and you see nothing. And then in its appropriate time, the rice shoots, seem to emerge like magic out of the water of the rice paddy. So also in the total vasana inherent within consciousness, hidden from view, is the potentiality of everything. Going on.
प्रपञ्चोत्पत्तिरेवं हि बालख्यायिककाक्रमात् राजपुत्रात्रय सन्ति शूरा असति पत्तने. The origin of the world is indeed like this, in the manner of a tale narrated to a child by the mother. There are 3 brave princes in a non-existent city.
So what we have here is the kind of a fairy tale that children tell their parents. Now, this is very interesting. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, educated people would look down on fiction as a literary form. If you were going to write something, you had to write about the truth. Today, we all read novels. Love them. But what is a novel? It's like the story that you get a bedtime story. Once upon a time. We have all these wonderful children's stories. God, Disney has made a fortune on them. Little Mermaid, Cinderella, Sleepy Hollow. So now we're going to talk about the story told by a mother to a child. Illustrate. Going on.
द्वौ न जातौ तथैकस्तु गर्भ एव हि न स्थितः एकदोतं लाभार्थं निर्गत्य फलशाम्लिनः दृदृशु गगने वृक्षान् भुक्त्वा स्वादु च तत्फलम् रसितयमात्सेदु पथि कल्लो lalitam. Of these 3, two were never born, and the other one never indeed was stationed in a womb. Once having gone out with the object of acquiring the best, they saw in the sky trees possessing fruits, and having eaten those sweet fruits, they reached three rivers crowned by large waves on the way.
Yes. So what the mother is doing is telling the child an imaginary story, a once upon a time story. And what she's doing is creating mental images. So here, the mother's weaving this story about the three sons. Going on.
Tatraika parishukshaiva managapyam gunadvayoh tatra snatva jalakridam kritva pitva payastatah. There one was completely dry, and there was not even a little water in the other two. Having bathed there and sported in the water, and having drunk the water.
So these princes are going to a castle that doesn't exist. They were never born. And those three rivers that have big waves, one had water in it, two were dry, but they're sporting in the water. Now, and then they drink the water from the river that had no water in it. Now we're going on.
Ase duste dinasyante bhavishya nagaram trayah dridrishutrasta ramyani trinayete bhavani cha. The three reached a city about to be or to be created in the future at the end of the day. There they saw three beautiful mansions.
So just going on, because there's no need for explaining these.
Ekam nirbhitti nistandham anutpannam grihadvayam prapu sthalitrayam tatra tatkancha na kalpitam. One was without walls and pillars, the other two houses were not produced, that is, they were non-existent. There they obtained three pans or vessels made of melted gold.
Going on.
Tatra karpa ratam yate dve eka churnatam gata tasya drona trayam pakwan nyunam drona trayena tu. Of these, two were in pieces and the other one was powdered. In that, 3 measures of rice, less than 3 measures were cooked.
Going on.
Annam prapya dvir jai bhuktam nirmukhai bahu bhojibihi avishtam tato bhuktva rajaputra trayohinte sukhameva sthitas tatra mrigavyava harinaha. Obtaining that food, it was eaten by the brahmanas without mouths eating much. Then those 3 princes, having eaten the remnants, stayed there happily engaged in hunting.
Going on.
Dhatraya hi kathitam etam nirvicharadhiya yatha balo nishchayamayati vicharonjhita chetasam iyam sansara rachana vyavistiti upagata. Just as a child attains conviction in this tale narrated by the mother due to a thoughtless or unreflecting mind, this creation of worldly life too has assumed existence to those from whose minds reflection or inquiry has left or dropped.
So let's examine the basic principles here. So one of the classic images you hear in the scripture, you see 2 of them, the child of a barren woman, the horns of a hare. So see if you can imagine a bunny rabbit that's got horns. Close your eyes and imagine a bunny rabbit with horns. Now open your eyes. Does the bunny rabbit with horns exist or does it not exist? What's the answer?
Both
Go on.
exist in the
It
mind.
does not exist.
Well, it certainly exists as an imagination, but it doesn't exist as something sat that is. Now, would you do me a favor? Set that book down and go grab Bhagavad Gita. You know where they are?
I see one.
Yeah. And look in chapter 2, verse 16. One of these days I will memorize the Sanskrit of this.
You said 1-6, right?
1:6, yes. Asato na vidyate
Yeah.
bhavaha.
Found it. Shall I read it?
Please, in Sanskrit first, then the English.
Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah, ubharopi drishtonta satvan nayo sattva tat darshabhihi. So the translation: the unreal has no being. There is no non-being of the real. The truth about both these has been seen by the knowers of the truth, or the seers of the essence.
This is one of the most subtle and most important verses in Gita. So the first thing we're dealing with, sat and asat, nasato, it does nasataha, it does not exist, has no being. So we think the chair exists, the lamp exists, the table exists, the horns of a hare, the child of a barren woman, this once upon a time story. It's not real. It's only imagination. Things that exist, things that don't exist. We set that discussion on the shelf. Then we have bhava, being. We tend to separate the world into things and beings. The table is a thing, Saundarya is a being. The chair is a thing. I don't know about Puneet. I think he's a being. You know. We separate the world into things and beings. What this verse says is, if it doesn't exist, it has no being. If it exists, it has being. Meaning, that which is non-being is imagination. That which has no being is imagination. Horns of a hare, child of a barren woman. What is it that has being? Only I has being. Only you have bhava, being. Everything else, meaning the entire objective, phenomenal world, gross and subtle, has no being and is asat. It has no real existence. Now, just because it's imagination doesn't mean it's not powerful. So let's use a very modern, common example. Santa Claus. So my big, long white beard in my belly, if I'm wearing a red shirt and a hat, many, many times as I'm walking down the sidewalk on Grand Avenue, little 3 and 4-year-olds will go, "Mommy, Santa Claus, Santa Claus." And of course, what do? I go, "Oh, oh, oh." I play Santa Claus for the kids. Now, those children, Christmas morning, all the gifts are under the tree. Santa brought them. And at some point, the child, maybe when they're 6, starts to begin to suspect there's no Santa Claus. So the idea of Santa Claus is very powerful, even though it's imagination. As a social icon, now even before Halloween, stores start da, 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 da. The idea of Santa Claus and Christmas, very powerful, even though in the relative world it's unreal. But we give it a kind of reality. Another modern day example of the fellow who shows up at the pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. with guns, trying to stop the child trafficking ring that's being run out of the basement. For him, it was very real, because it was strong belief. It was never there, never happened. So what the scripture is saying with the story of the child, all of this, without exception, is like a fairy tale. Entertaining, now listen carefully. That doesn't mean there's some other story that's real. In Mandukya Upanishad, in the 2nd chapter, by Tatya, the 4th Karika basically says the phenomenal world is unreal, and the proof of its unreality is that you can see it. Only I, which is Atman, which is Brahman, is real. That be so, don't worry. Because my worry is based on the habit, the conditioned belief in the reality of the world. Just like the child has the strong belief in Santa Claus. No different. Any thoughts on this? Okay, let's finish the story.
That was the last verse.
That was the last verse. Okay, so we finished this. Now we start on very cool story, the story of Lavana.
It was the ending verse.
Oh, okay.
Iti Shri Vasishta Sangrahe Bhavana Vaibhavam Nama Shashta Sargaha. Thus ends the 6th chapter titled The Power of Thought in the abridgment of Yoga Vasishta. Chapter 7, Saptama Sarga. Lavarno Pakyanam, the story of Lavana. Shambarikena Mohanam, the delusion caused by the juggler. Section 1.
Now, the word he's using here is juggler. It's not my favorite translation. Is it Mayavi? Can you look ahead?
He says Mohanam.
Mohanam. Mayavi, Indravi, Mohanam, they all basically mean the same thing, an illusionist. So a more accurate example would be a stage hypnotist, someone who can make you think something. It's not a juggler, a person with balls in the air. Normally when we say juggler, that's, at least in the US, that's what we think. But the Indian use of the word, did you use the word juggler in India, you people who were born there, to mean someone who would sleight of hand or stuff like that?
No, it was mostly a person who like
Throws
shuffles
balls in there, yeah. But that's how the word jugglery is being used. Going on.
Actually, the word for juggler is, they use is Shambarika.
Okay.
Vasishta Uvacha. Vasishta said, Swasankalpa Vashat Mudho Mohameti na Panditaha Vicharaya Dhiya Satyam Asatyam Cha Parityaja. By his own imagination, a fool is deluded, not a wise man. Reflect on truth with your intellect and discard untruth.
So the foolish person is deluded by their imaginary images. So let me tell you what it really is, what's really going on. So imagine that you sit down at the table with a great big piece of butcher paper. And then you draw a carrot on it, color it in. And then you find a stick that's just a couple inches longer than your arm. And you get a little thing that's U-shaped that fits on top of your head, and you put it on the end of the stick, and you clip the butcher paper with the carrot on it at the other end of the stick. Then you put it over your head, and you see the carrot, and you run and run and run and run, and you're so tired, and you're working so hard and running up hills even. And then finally the wind blows a bit, and you reach out and you grab the picture of the carrot, and then you think, look at me. I got a raise. I got a new house. I got a wife or husband. I got my green card. I got this. I got that. And what we've really done, in my mind, I decide what it is that's desirable. I've drawn the carrot. I'm the one who's decided that it's distant from me. And then I struggle and run after it. And then, according to karma, I get it or I don't. And then when I get it, I think I am so smart. I am happy because I have the carrot. And all of it nothing more than that dance of silliness. That's this world. So I decide what I think is going to make me happy. I decide my happiness is far from me. I decide I must struggle to get it. When in truth, happiness, peace is my self-nature. Going on.
Mana prashamane rama moksham evava ishyate atrate shrinu vakshyami vrittantam imamuttamam. Rama, with the quenching of the mind, only the liberation remains. In this matter, I shall tell you an excellent narrator. Hear this.
So when we say the quenching of the mind, this doesn't mean attaining some thoughtless state or enfeebling the mental faculties. The mind is three thoughts. First, Jiva Bhavana, I feel like a person. Two, I have a goal. That goal only takes one of two forms. I either need to change the world to get this, that, or the other thing, or I need to change me. I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not pretty enough, etc. Third element, kartavya, struggle, obligatory action. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, work hard, work hard, work hard. Those three ideas are the mind. Quench those three ideas and our suffering is gone. It is that simple. I think I'm a person. I think there's a world of name and form, of goals separate from me, and I need to struggle toward that goal in order to be happy. So the quenching of the mind is the quenching of those three ideas. Now, I like to think of the three of them like the basis of a tower of cards. So when you were kids, you may have put the three cards leaning against each other, and then you would build the tower as high as you could, and then finally, crash. So that's the huge complex structure of my ego, my life, all my situations and the issues and the stuff that I have. It seems so very complicated. But the base of it all, I think I'm a person, ahankriti. Some world ago and struggle. Any thoughts on this?
With quenching, do you mean like satisfying the mind? Is
Pardon
giving
me?
that up? Quenching, you mean like satisfying?
Quenching means to stop or to put out a fire.
Oh, I thought you said quenching, like
Quenching.
to.
Quenching. Like quenching your thirst. It means to put water on something, doesn't it?
But
the idea here
it said
is to
satisfy when I looked it up. I was confused. I don't know. My apologies.
It doesn't necessarily mean to satisfy the mind. It means to stop the mind's struggling.
Okay.
As if the mind were a burning fire. We're going to put the fire out.
Okay. So are you saying just empty the mind like it tells you in meditation, or?
I did not say emptying the mind. I said remove those three ideas. I think I'm a person. I think the world's real. and I have the necessity of struggle. To quench the mind is to remove those three ideas.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Justin?
Yeah, thank you. My apologies.
Good question. Nothing to apologize for. Going on.
लवणो नाम भूपाल आसीत् परमधार्मिकः तत्सभामेकदा कश्चित् साटोपम् इन्द्रजालिकः प्रविश्य नत्वा भूपालं राजन्नो तां विकोलकय इत्युक्त्वा भ्रामिता तेन पिञ्चिका भ्रमदायिनी. There was a virtuous king by the name Lavana. Once a certain juggler, entering his council chamber proudly and having bowed to the king, said, "King, see this." Having said thus, a bunch of peacock feathers used by conjurers, which produces delusion, was whirled round by him.
Now there it's called an Indrajala.
Indrajalika.
Indrajalika. That's another name for a illusionist. So Lavan is sitting there in his palace, and there's this dude coming through town, comes to the palace, and he has this kind of a fan kind of business made of peacock feathers. And he bows to the king and says, "Watch the feathers." So this is the way in which he puts the king into a trance. But we don't know that yet. Let's see what happens. Going on.
Tata saindhavasamanto viveshashchayuta sabham rajanam cha tadaproche pritya sa indrajalikaha. Then the neighborhood king of the Sindhu territory entered the council chamber accompanied by a horse. Then that juggler spoke to the king with friendliness or affection.
So now a neighboring king comes leading a horse. What are they going to do with the horse? Let's see. Going on.
Sadascham ema maruhya bhuvanam vihara prabho athani mishyaya drishtya rajascha mavaloikayan tasthau muhurta yugmam tu dhyanasakta ivatmani. King, mounting on this good horse, go about the world. Then the king, seeing the horse with unwinking eyes, stood still for 2 muhurtas, or nearly 1.5 hours, as if he were absorbed in meditation on the self.
So the juggler, the illusionist, says, "Get on the horse, take a ride." And the king just stands there, his eyes wide opening, for 2 muhurtas. Muhurtas are 48 hours. Minutes, 48 minutes, looking at this. So let's see what happens now.
Tataste vismayapanna yuyushchinta sabhasadah babhuvasau prabuddhota paryakulamati nripah samyak prapta prabodhascha provacha mantrinas. Then those members of the assembly who were filled with wonder became anxious. Then the king, whose mind was confused, became awakened. Thus, having attained wakefulness completely, he spoke to his ministers thus.
So after the 2 muhurtas, he comes out of his trance. Oh my God, is the guy having some sort of a seizure? Is he an epileptic? What's going on? Comes to, and everybody in the audience chamber is a little concerned. So now let's see what the king says happened to him during the hour and a half that he was in a trance.
Rajovacha, the king said, Idam Ashcharyamakhyanam Shrinutadhya Sabhasadaha Pinchikam Ahamaklokya Jalamena Brahmitamimam Ashvam Arudhavan Enam Atmana Bhrantamanasaha Pravitto Mrigayam Gantum Duram Nitosmi Vajina. Hear this wonderful story today. Members of the assembly, having seen this bunch of peacock feathers whirled by the rogue, I mounted this horse by myself with a confused mind. Proceeding to go on hunting, I have been led to a distance by the horse.
So Arudha Ashwa means to mount the horse. And we've talked about in Bhagavad Gita, we get the term Yoga Rudha, to mount the steed of the mind. So here it's used in a more literal sense. He gets on the horse and he's kind of spaced out and he heads out hunting on the horse. So let's see what happens when he heads out on the horse. Going on.
Sampraptoham aparyantam aranyam shrantavahanah asuryastam dinam tatra prakramya jadalam gatah. I reached an unbounded forest with a fatigued vehicle or horse. Proceeding there in the day till sunset, I went to a rural area.
So he passes through a forest. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. He hasn't drunk anything. And he passes through the forest into a rural area. No civilization there. Tribal areas. Let's see what happens.
Tatra Jambira Khandasya Skandha Sargani Nilatam Ritva Pralambamanam Mam Tyaktva Yata Turangamaha. There, leaving me, who was hanging down by holding onto a creeper united with the branch of a portion of a citron tree, the horse went away. So the horse keeps going. He's sitting on the back of the horse. They go underneath this tree, and there's a creeper on a branch. King reaches up and grabs the creeper, and the horse just keeps going. And he's holding on to the creeper, and then he lets go, and it's there on the ground without a cell phone. Nobody around. This is a rural area, like unpopulated. He's hungry and he's thirsty, and now no horse, no cell phone. Going on. Tatra kalpa samaratri mohanam nasya megata athashta bhaga mapanne yonno divasanayake drishta maya prabhamata balikaudana dharini yachitapi maya yatnat nanam dattavati hasa. There, a night seemingly equal to the period of a world cycle elapsed for me who was immersed in delusion. When the Lord of the day, or the sun, reached the eighth part of the sky, a young woman carrying food was seen by me who was revolving or tottering. Even though begged by me assiduously, she never indeed gave the food. So he's there underneath the tree all night long. Mind you, this is a king who's been used to like nice soft beds, and several wives probably were also nice and soft. So he's lying there on the ground all night. So the eighth part of the day
what is that, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon? It's hot. I always imagine like they're in Rajasthan someplace, you know, it's just really hot. I think this young lady comes by. She's got food and water. He's, parched dude. Let's see what happens. Going on.
Vidhi mamiha chandalim mato napnoshi bhojanam dadami bhojanam tubhyam bharta bhavasi chetamam. Know me, as she said, know me here as an outcast woman. You do not obtain any food from me. If you become my husband, I give you the food.
So, in these ancient times, we have the ritual concerns of caste. So he's Kshatriya, he's a king. And she's Chandala, she's an outcast. Scheduled classes. Tribal. So what's he going to do? The rules are he's not supposed to touch her, let alone accept food from her. But she says, these are the rules. I'm not giving you any food. But if you marry me, then you get it. Now, is he going to have the admixture of castes? He's hungry. Let's see what he does. Going on.
Athokta samaya bharta avamiti tatattaya dattam anam maya bhuktam varnajati kulakramaha kena padi vicharyante mohapahrita chetasa bahunatra kimuttena svikrita samaya tataha. Then she was told by me thus, I become your husband. Thereafter, the food given by her was eaten by me. By whom are the orders of color, caste, and family investigated with the mind, carried away by delusion when in danger? What is the use of telling much in this matter? She was then accepted by me as wife.
We have to read this story understanding a historical context. It's racist and classist. Today, we wouldn't write a story like this. But set our distaste for the racism and the classism aside for a moment for the purpose of the telling of the tale. So this text is probably 1,500 years old, 1,300 years old, maybe, and see it within its historical context. So nobody thinks about issues around caste when they're deluded, is what he's saying. If your mind is clear, you're observant about those things. We aren't so rigid about these sorts of things today. We don't hold them with the same kind of rigidity. Any thoughts on this before we go on? Comparable thing in the Western world. Some of you youngsters may not be old enough to remember the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Anybody remember that movie?
Absolutely.
And why was it, Sidney Poitier was in it. Why was that such an outrageous movie in its day?
This was about a white woman bringing a black man home to her parents.
Not only bringing a black man home for his parents, they were going to get married. Yeah. Any of you remember Lieutenant Uhura in the old, first TV series of Star Trek?
Yes.
and what happened between Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura that absolutely drove people in America cuckoo-luna at the time.
Not too sure. I'm not that. I was a little bit before my time.
Interracial kiss.
Oh, really?
Yes, the first time on TV or a film. Star Trek. So, you know, we also in America have our racism and our classism. So we are not, we're not pointing a finger at Indian culture. That's not true about us here in America, even perhaps more so. So anyway, setting all that aside, let's just see it as a story in its historical context. So,
Jim,
yes,
question. So setting all the apologies for that aside, like in the context of the text, what is the point that they're trying
the
to make?
point is he shouldn't even be touching her. He shouldn't be eating food that's not prepared by someone who's a Chandala.
Yeah, I got that part, but like what point is that trying to make?
That he's deluded and he's not observing the
Okay.
appropriate purity rituals that he should.
And that's like a metaphor for something?
That's, it's just bad.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, it was bad that Thomas Jefferson had sex with Hemming. What was her first name? Sally Hemings. Yeah. So anyway, does that make it a little clear?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so he's breaking the rules, is the point. Going on.
क्रमात् गर्भवती भूत्वा प्रसूता कन्यकाद्वयं तथा पुत्रद्वयं चैव जातोऽहं पुष्पपुल्कसः. Having become pregnant in due course, she gave birth to 2 girls. Thereafter also gave birth to 2 boys. I became a complete Pulkasa, a tribal man.
So he completely absorbs himself in that tribal culture. So it would be like someone going to a completely different country today and deciding to live with the dress, the language, the customs of that culture, even though they were born a European, shall we say. So he has 4 kids and he forgets, as it were, his kingship, decides life's a whole lot better being a Pulkasa, a tribal person. Going on.
Chandalatve sthiribhute upatattvam mama vismritam evam tatram maya nita shashti kalpa samaha. When the wicked qualities of an outcast had become firm, my kingship was forgotten. Thus were spent by me 60 years there, which seemed to be equal to a world cycle.
So he had forgotten those things that were the qualities of being a king, and instead, again, this is racist, saying that people who were born in that particular caste are evil. I won't even try to justify it. But in America, we have some remnants of that kind of thing. So if you have friends, for example, who are African American, they may do things like eat chitlins. Anybody know what chitlins are? They're the internal organs of the animal, or pig's feet. Why do you think these foods are popular in African American cuisine? Because when they were slaves, the white people got the good cuts of meat, and the slaves got the entrails. and then became that cultural cuisine. In Gita, as we get towards the end, in the last chapter, we view the world through the lens of the three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva. One of them is we look at food. What's tamasic food? What's rajasic food? What's sattvic food? One of the things they say is food that's not fresh, that's more than a few hours old, tamasic. Guess who got to eat food that wasn't fresh? The servants. Leftovers. We even find those elements in the Gita. So we know more now. So we don't throw out the whole scripture because the historical context has things we don't believe in now. One of the examples I like to share with people, St. Paul in the Christian scriptures says very clearly, wives obey your husbands, slaves obey your masters. Because in 2000 years ago, in the classical period Roman Empire, women's status more than a cow, but not quite as much as a horse. And the entire economy was based on slavery. But we know better now. So it's pointless to try to rationalize, well, slavery was really different, and what was a way to protect women? No, we know better now. So every scripture has a historical context. Believe me, 1,000 years from now, people are going to look back on the way we live and they're going to be horrified. I promise you, no matter how woke we think we are. Any thoughts on this? All right, going on.
एवं मयि स्थितते तत्र नवश्च शुरमन्दिरे आसीत् तत्राथ दुर्भिक्षं गता सर्वे सुहृज्जनाः. When I was staying there thus, in the house of the new father-in-law, there was then a famine in that place. All the friendly people were gone.
So after 60 years, a famine comes upon that part of India, and all his friends, all the people in the village, they become migrants. They leave. He's an old man by this point. 60 years he was there, so he's probably what, 75, maybe by this time, maybe even 80, going on.
Aham dukkhadapatyyastu tayacha sahitah shanaihi krishtrat deshat vinirgatya vishrantosmi tarostale. Due to distress, having gone out slowly from the miserable country, I, accompanied by my wife and children, have rested underneath a tree.
So he decides to migrate, looking for sustenance too. So he's still got the wife and the kids going on.
Kaniyan balako mamcha masam dehitya chata dukkham sodhum ashaktoham marane krita nishchayah tatra kasthani sanchitya chittaya patitosmaham chalitosmin javat tavat prabuddhoham hi hastitah. The younger son begged me to give him meat. Unable to bear the agony and having resolved to die, gathering pieces of wood there, I have fallen into the funeral pyre. I have been displaced speedily just now, and having been awakened, I stand here.
So he can't feed his kids, can't feed his wife. He cannot bear the suffering. Kids are dying, starving to death. So he gathers wood, builds a funeral pyre, and jumps on it. Then he wakes up, and there he is, the king, sitting on his throne in the audience chamber. So in his trance, 60 years have gone by. In the audience chamber, an hour and a half or so, 2 muhurtas going on.
Evam Shambarikenaayam moha utpadito mamaha ityuktavati Rajendre Mayavati sa nirodhate. Thus was this delusion of mind produced by the juggler. When the king was telling thus, that conjurer disappeared.
So the illusion of the whole life as a tribal person was conjured by the Mayavi, the juggler, and as soon as the king sees it, the dude disappears. Poof. Let's see what happens.
Atheda muchaste sabhyaha vismayot kullalochanaha nayam shambariko deva yasya nasti dhaneshana daivi kachana mayeyam sansara sthiti bodhini. Then those members of the assembly, with their eyes widely opened with wonder, told this: Lord, this man for whom there is no greed for wealth is not a juggler. This is some divine illusion which teaches the state of worldly existence.
Yes. So the point of the story is, just like Lavana became hypnotized and imagined the story in a trance, so also you and I have been hypnotized by the Mahamayavi, Ishvara himself. And we think all this is real, when in fact it's a very long, very vivid dream going on.
The end of this section.
That's the end of it?
Yeah, so we're starting a new section.
Okay, this is a good place to stop there. Any thoughts on this wonderful story? By the way, is it Lavana or Lavana?
Lavana.
Short A, okay. Out there in Zoom land, any thoughts?
Thanks for the evening. Appreciate it.
All right, so we'll end here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.
Thank you.